1937, Kyoto Lieutenant Commander Edwin T. Leto meets with Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto following a dinner with the Japanese Navy. Yamamoto tells Leighton how Japan is eager to become a world power on the same level as the US and China, but the US only sends a limited amount of oil. He promises to Leighton that if their supplies are compromised, the Japanese will be forced to take drastic measures. 4 years later, World War II is raging on, with Japan having invaded China and Hitler taking over Europe. The US has remained neutral up until this point. Just over 1,000 miles of Pearl Harbor, pilot Dick Best is flying during a routine exercise with other pilots, ending with a rocky landing aboard the USS Enterprise. He must stay behind and work with his superior officer, Wade McCluskey. On the USS Arizona, LT, Roy Pierce is setting up for church with the rookies. Moments later, Japanese airships fly in and begin to fire upon Pearl Harbor. Ships are bombed and pilots are shot out of the sky. Best's wife Anne and daughter Barbara notice the attack from their backyard. Leighton is alerted to the attack and joins his fellow officers. Pierce helps the young men move across to a safer boat while he stays behind and tries to fight back. McCluskey gathers his men to prepare themselves for battle now that the U.S. is officially part of WWII. After bodies are recovered from the ocean, Best goes to identify Pierce's body as he was his roommate and old friend. With Pierce's body burnt beyond recognition, Best can only identify him with a class ring. Later, Best joins his fellow soldiers at a bar to toast to Pierce's memory. In Japan, Yamamoto becomes aware that the attack has provoked the U.S. In a pivotal moment of strategic planning, Admiral Chester Nimitz assumes command of the U.S. Pacific Fleet in the aftermath of the devastating Pearl Harbor attack. Meeting with Rear Admiral Taman Yamaguchi, Nimitz expresses disappointment over Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo's failure to target U.S. oil tankers and redirects their focus toward the formidable U.S. air carriers. Meanwhile, Nimitz confronts Lieutenant Commander Edwin Leighton, discussing the intelligence failure that led to the surprise attack. Despite Leighton's shortcomings, Nimitz asserts his commitment to leading the Pacific Fleet in the upcoming battles. Determined to turn the tide of the war, Nimitz orders an invasion of the Marshall Islands as the first step in the counteroffensive against the Japanese forces. The stage is set for a critical chapter in the Pacific theater, as Nimitz and his team prepare to confront the challenges that lie ahead. McCluskey's men fly into the islands, while William Bull Halsey's men take on the Japanese from the seas. A fight ensues with U.S. pilots firing upon Japanese ships. A machinist named Bruno Guido manages to successfully shoot down a Japanese plane into the ocean, which gets him promoted by Halsey. Later on, LT, Colonel James Doolittle arrives as the men are heading to Japan to provide bomber planes with the intent of striking Tokyo. They begin their air raids across Japan. Doolittle ends up in Japanese-occupied territory in China. The harrowing onslaught on the village where Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle is located leaves a trail of tragedy, with Japanese planes inflicting casualties upon innocent civilians. In the wake of this ruthless attack, Intelligence Officer Edwin Leighton promptly informs Admiral Chester Nimitz of a critical development. Cryptanalyst Joseph Rochefort has intercepted a message indicating Japanese movements toward the Coral Sea with a cryptic target labeled AF. Responding to this ominous threat, the American forces swiftly reposition themselves in the direction of the Coral Sea. In a strategic reshuffling, Admiral William Halsey appoints Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey to lead the pilots, and Lieutenant Richard Best assumes the role of skipper. However, Leighton challenges the prevailing belief in Washington, positing that AF is a coded reference to Midway, not a location in the South Pacific. Leighton's insight suggests an imminent Japanese attack on Midway, contradicting the initial assessment and prompting intensified preparations for the impending conflict set to unfold in a matter of weeks. The unfolding events set the stage for a high-stakes showdown in the Pacific theater, where intelligence interpretation becomes a pivotal factor in the unfolding drama of war. Leighton brings Nimitz to personally meet with Rochefort to back up their claims. Nimitz orders them to try and convince Washington with this information. Nimitz later acknowledges this as fact after learning from Rochefort's cryptologists that the target is a place with a water shortage, and Leighton had just learned Midway's water plant was down. Best begins training the rookies to fly. One man messes up and lands in the water, getting killed when a ship sails over the plain. Best expresses his woes and doubts to Am later that night. Nimitz orders USS Hornet and Enterprise out of the Coral Sea and demands that Yorktown, which has been greatly damaged, be spruced up for attack within 72 hours. The men continue to prepare and train themselves, all while dreading the battle that lies ahead. On the morning of June 4th, the Japanese launch their attack on Midway. Director John Ford runs around the scene with his crew to get some great footage for his next project. The Americans swoop in to join the battle. McCluskey orders his men to follow the Japanese as their destroyer makes its way back to the main fleet for reinforcements. The U.S. launch a torpedo at a Japanese battleship, but they miss. As tensions escalate, Japanese commanders Nagumo and Yamaguchi intensify their plans to launch another strike against the American air carriers. In a daring move, American pilots relentlessly bomb the Japanese battleships, causing severe damage to their fleet. Amidst the fierce naval battle, Gaido and a fellow soldier are discovered in the ocean by the Japanese and taken captive. In a defiant act, Gaido insults his captors, resulting in a brutal retaliation as he is thrown overboard, sinking with an anchor. The retaliatory exchange reaches its peak as the Japanese successfully destroy the USS Yorktown. Informed of the devastating loss, Lieutenant Richard Best is resolute in his determination to strike back. Despite significant casualties, Best rallies his remaining men, assembling a determined squadron to seek out and destroy the last remaining Japanese carrier, setting the stage for a pivotal and intense phase of the Pacific conflict. The movie ends here. Thanks for watching.